I just want to say, you know, can we all get along? Can we get along? Um, can we stop making it horrible for the older people and the kids?
Rodney King, His Race, His Plea, His Death is an article published the 18th June 2012 in Forbes magazine by Cat Scott. Cat Scott is an American true crime writer with notable work like The Killing of Tupac Shakur. This article we present to you was published when Rodney King was found dead after an accident in his swimming pool at the age of 47 during Father's Day. In this article, Kathy Scott reports the event during the riots 20 years ago. From the beginning, the title indicates a look at one man's life that had a huge impact on the city of Los Angeles. Throughout the article, the author Kathy Scott describes how one thing led a chain reaction involving riots, violence to change LAPD, and as a reminder of how minorities were not as much respected. It was written when Rodney King became the symbol of a fight against police brutality, which is an action conducted by police officers in the performance of their duties. Also a symbol to fight for civil rights, which refer to the protection and privileges of fundamental freedoms granted to all citizens by law against all forms of discrimination. Then, finally, to establish a better communication between minority communities and the law enforcement. The author Kathy Scott recounts her personal experience during the riots with Russell Clicker, a famous photographer. In the first part, we will expose the ins and outs of the Rodney King case. In the second part, the point of view of the rioters by the author, and finally the consequence over time of Rodney King's case.
Rodney King was born on the 2nd April 1965 in Sacramento and died on the 17th June 2012 in Rialto in California. He was an African American. His case began on the 3rd March 1991 with a chase and refusal to cooperate. He was being chased by 4 police officers. They were brutal to him when they managed to get him to stop. In fact, they gave him 50 blows on the body. Someone filmed the scene of his arrest. It was a very violent scene. In the paragraph 5, King became a symbol. So King became a symbol of civil rights, police brutality, and minority communities in the USA. This character went viral overnight. His face was all over the media as he was recognizable. This event created a chain reaction that resulted in numerous riots and demonstrations.
Following the event of Rodney King's beating, a lot of protests and riots began to happen. These protests were the embodiment of the rage born of the frustration by the minorities. The Rodney King case was really not the first case of police brutality in America, and if it could happen to him, it could happen to any person from a minority. And even more, when the 4 officers were acquitted, despite being caught on camera, it literally meant you could beat a black man in the street, the world could see it, and yet it made no difference. The author and her friend Russell Clicker were living the riots and the atmosphere coming from it. In the text, they talk more specifically about the Korean riots. This riot happened because a Korean person shot a black girl in the head, thinking she was stealing, which became a trigger causing many riots again.
From the point of view of the author and her friends, people were going crazy. We could see shops being looted, neighborhood literally burning, even innocent people just doing their jobs being harmed. One example we can give of this is what happened to Russell Clicker, the photographer. People were blocking his truck and he saw someone getting ready to swing his truck with a bat, but ran away before his truck was hit. Another very good example of this is the photo he took of a man jumping in front of a National Guard ready to hit him with a bat. It was really a standoff, as he said, and when we look at the photo we can only agree with him. The damage brought by these riots made a huge physical impact on the city. A curfew has been set up by police, only allowing police, fire department and media on the streets. Even schools were closed and some people were told to not go to work. Even though it quickly became the principal subject of all media in the United States on a national scale, we must look at how they left the city at the very moment that happened. Was it all worth it?
The events that followed the Rodney King case were not without consequences, both for the history of California and the personal feelings of individuals. For example, she said that it was a scary time in the paragraph 10. This unprecedented event in Los Angeles, at the paragraph 14, they said the nation that forever changed Los Angeles. This unprecedented event in Los Angeles could not be diverted by journalists. As the author explained in the paragraph 10, it was a scary time but an important one to document. After recounting the fact, Katie Scott returned to the person that Rodney King was and the consequences of his beating from the paragraph 10 to the end. She said that Rodney King made a lot of talk shows with the release of his memoir, The Riot Within. She said also at the paragraph 14, in his appearance he seemed content and he held no ill will towards the officer who had once beaten him. He was in a good place. This satisfied spirit was only that Rodney King led on. Despite the fact that just before Katie Scott described the death of Rodney King as not a disturbing death at the paragraph 12, there was no sign of foul play. However, what Rodney King experienced was not without consequences because 20 years later, his girlfriend found him drowned and dragged in his backyard swimming pool in the Father's Day. To conclude, the article Katie Scott uses words from the Reverend Old chapter that Rodney King carried the weight of the struggle against police brutality and anti-racialism on his shoulder. At the paragraph 15, he said, represented the anti-police brutality and anti-racial profiling movement of our time.
For many years now, American law enforcement agencies are known to have committed crimes against minority communities, especially against Afro-American citizens. In 2008, following the election of Barack Obama, despite the measures taken, social injustices and police violence have not completely ceased. He did, however, set out to address the judicial system, which has imprisoned far more African Americans for minor crimes than other ethnicities. 6,000 African Americans have been released between the 30th October and the 2nd November 2015. In order to reduce the problems between police officers and citizens, the implementation of pedestrian cameras in February 2012 has helped to reduce violence during arrests. However, this has not led to a total halt in police crime. Trayvon Martin, 2012, shot by George Zimmerman in Florida. Trayvon Martin was 17 years old and he was holding a bag of Skittles, iced tea, and wearing a hoodie. The police officer George Zimmerman was acquitted. Eric Garner, 2014. When Eric Garner refuses to put his hand behind his back, Officer Daniel Pantaello uses a shocking technique provided by NYPD to coerce him despite Eric says, "I can breathe."
Michael Brown, an 18-year-old man shot by Darren Wilson in Ferguson in Missouri. Wilson committed a violation against civil rights. Obama's response was, and it is incumbent upon all of us as Americans, regardless of race, region, faith, that we recognize that this is an American problem and not just a black problem or a brown problem or a Native American problem. This is an American problem. When anybody in this country is not being treated under the law, that's a problem. And it's my job as the president to help and solve it.
To put it in a nutshell, can we say that demonstrations or riots are a good way to make the minority's voice heard and finally end police brutality?